Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 12 of What If Deku Date Momo Yaoyorozu. If you notice some errors or some missing parts in the video, please tell me in the comment down below. Hope you'll enjoy the video. Ichako's body felt cold. This psycho schoolgirl was terrifying. Uraraka had just pinned her to the ground, but now she was saying crazy nonsense with the most insane Cheshire grin she'd ever seen. I can smell it on you, Ichako. You're just like me, crushing on someone. But your smell is a little different. Your crush is new and different. I like that. My crush is special too. I like guys who reek of blood and pain. I want to be just like them. I'll drink their blood forever, so I can be just like them. Ichako felt a sharp pain in her thigh. One of Toga's syringes pierced her skin and sucked out her blood. Ichako. Sayu yelled from the tree she was stuck to. Oh. I can see it in your eyes. You're thinking about them right now. Don't worry, I can't let another maiden die without confessing to her love. You won't die. I just need some delicious blood. Suck suck. Suck suck. Uraraka. The brunette looked up to see Izuku, Momo, Katsuki, and Shoto come out through the woods. Toga took her chance and broke free from Uraraka's grip. The blonde rushed into the woods, but not without looking back at the group. Her cat eyes focused in on the green-haired boy. Dried and cracking blood covered his body and his adorable face. A cast covered up a severely broken yet muscular arm. Bruises and scuff marks covered him head to toe. He was perfect. Toga smiled and rushed off into the dark woods, already planning her future with her someday husband. The teens ran up to Uraraka and Sayu. Todoroki helped Sue down while Momo patched up Ichako's leg and arm. Izuku bent down to his friend. We're glad you're all right. Have you seen Kayaka? Uraraka interrupted, panicked. No. We haven't. But I might know where she is. Her group should have been around the top of the beast's forest by now. So she should be. Izuku stopped as he looked into the distance. All eyes turned to see a large portion of the forest pouring gas out of it. Over there somewhere, Ichako's heart stopped when she saw that. Kayaka was somewhere in that gas. I'm going after her. But Uraraka, I'm going Deku. I have to. Then we're going with you. No. At least not everyone. You guys need to get Bakugo back to the lodge and save more people. I need to find Kayaka. Sayu walked up to Ichako. I'll go with you. Momo tried to step in, but what if you guys run in with another villain? Ichako looked back to the gas. I think specific villains were designated certain areas. That gas has to be coming from somewhere. Whatever villain is making it, well, just take him down. Momo knew Ichako was as determined as they come, so she compromised. Then both of you, take these. 2 gas masks popped out of Momo's leg. She handed them to the girls, and they took off into the forest towards the gas. Izuku watched as they left. He wanted nothing more than to go and help them, but he also knew that others needed their help. And taking Bakugo and Momo even further into a villain's turf would be a bad idea. For now, he just had to put faith in Ichako and Sue's abilities. Their backs faded into the darkness. As they disappeared, the eyes of the wielders took their place. Everything went silent in his mind. He couldn't hear anything except whispers. They were trying to talk to him. That was definitely new. Suddenly things began to clear up. One pair of eyes suddenly started to become much clearer and less foggy. They got closer. Their face began to take shape. Izuku could see Midoriya. Are you alright? Izuku turned his head to Todoroki, who had startled him out of his trance. He looked back to the woods to find nothing there. Yeah, I'm fine. I just thought I saw something. Well, come on. We should get go, Midoriya? Yeah? Where did Yaoyorozu and Bakugo go? Izuku's heart rate skyrocketed. He turned around to see that they were in fact gone. No. Young love. Izuku and Todoroki both looked up into the trees to see Mr. Compress atop the leaves and branches, looking towards the direction Uraraka and Sue ran off in. 2 young teenagers fallen for one another, one in danger and the other desperately trying to save her. I guess you're about to be in that same situation, aren't you? Compress said, looking at Midoriya. What? I'll tell you, I'm tempted to just take the Yaoyorozu girl and just set up a ransom for myself. She'd make quite the pretty penny. Too bad, I guess. Compress held up 2 marbles as he spoke. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized who exactly those marbles were. Bye. Compress began to hop away across the treetops. Izuku immediately shot off after him. Midoriya, wait. Todoroki tried to call after him, but he was already gone. Achako, do we even knows where we're going? I think so. This gas moving outward, and if it's coming from a villain then they'll be the singularity point. It's like a black hole. We just need to go where the gas is coming from. Asui smiled under her gas mask. It's a good thing you know space so well. Another thing, when did you start liking Kayaka? Achako stopped. What? I don't, Achako. I don't know. It just happened all right. This whole liking a girl thing is new to me. Asui put a hand on her friend's arm. Well, as long as you actually act on your feelings this time then you should be fine, Ribbit. You don't want another Midoriya situation. How do you know about that? Well, I figured this crush out. So I should be able to know your past ones too. Best friend, remember? Achako was blushing under her mask. Yeah, right. Thanks for get down. Bang! Achako tackled Tsu to the ground as a bullet soared above their heads and into one of the trees. They both rolled behind a large tree and took cover. Achako peeked out from behind her cover to see a boy about their age wearing a school uniform, a gas mask, gloves, a backpack, and was holding a 6-shot revolver. Really? You actually came into the gas without any sort of plan or protection. Typical UA students. So high and mighty. Achako turned to Tsu and silently hand-signaled that she was going to sneak around the villain using the thick gas as cover. She slowly put her foot out from behind the tree. Bang! Achako jumped back, the bullet barely missing her toes. Yeah, nice try. But I can feel your movement in my gas. Achako slowly calmed her heart rate and rested against the tree. She'd never actually fought against a villain with a gun. Most criminals rely on their quirks these days. It was odd to think that these days guns are kinda forgotten by many, but are still one of the deadliest tools on the planet. They needed a way out of this. Mustard was definitely still somewhat cautious. He hasn't made a move to advance on them, so he must be wary of what they could do if he got too close to them. It was just like the finals. 13 waited for them to attack first, making them sitting ducks. So they reversed it and made 13 the sitting duck. Achako knew they needed to do the same here. But the gas was the main problem. She could sneak around him if the gas was gone, but they couldn't get rid of that. So she needed to get rid of the second problem, the bullets. Okay. It has 6 bullets, and he's used up 2. If we can make him use them up, we can attack before he can reload. But how? Uraraka thought back to her fight with Bakugo. She had faked him out with her gym jacket. Maybe she could do it again. Uraraka looked at Tsu and raised her hand in a finger gun. Then she brought up 6 fingers, shot her finger gun twice, and then brought up 2 fingers, then 4 fingers. She took off her white button-up, leaving her in a black tank top, and motioned as if she was going to throw it. She shot off her finger gun again, pointing to Tsu, and used her fingers to show someone running around Mustard. Then her finger shot at Tsu, and then Achako pointed to herself, and then showed her fingers running again. As complicated as that seemed, Asui seemed to understand. Achako raised 3 fingers and counted down from 3. At 3, Uraraka tossed her button up across the gap between her tree and a different one. Mustard felt the movement and saw the white. Bang! Tsu took this chance to run to another tree to Mustard's side to hide behind. Mustard felt that movement and turned to shoot Tsu. Bang! But it was too late, Tsu was already behind her tree. Achako saw Mustard was looking at Tsu's direction and ran to the tree her shirt was behind and took cover once more. Mustard turned at her movements but didn't fire, not falling for it again. He began to back away into more trees. Damn it. That wasn't too bad. But now His foot hit something when he backed his through some bushes. He looked down to see a group of unconscious students who had fallen to his gas. Well, I guess it's my lucky day. Mustard picked up the nearest student and held his gun to her head. Alright. I think this game has gone on long enough. I got one of your classmates. Achako peeked out from behind her tree and gasped, her heart stopped. He had Kayaka. Mr. Compress had extremely underestimated Midoriya. At first, he was confident in his escapist skills and speed. What he didn't expect was for Izuku to be a ball of light that almost immediately caught up to him. The pain in his back was a clear sign of that. Izuku had shot off the ground and kicked Compress down to the ground. He landed down on him and wrestled the marbles out of his hand. He felt relieved until he heard an over-the-top gasp come from ahead of him. Izuku looked up to see Dabi, Twice, Toga, and Spinner all staring at him in surprise. Except Toga, who was creepily smiling at him. Compress turned his face out of the dirt. Are any of you gonna help me? Himiko immediately ran towards Izuku, knife at the ready. Hi Izuku, I'm Toga. I'm so happy to meet you. I've been thinking about you ever since I saw you. You'd look even more handsome with more blood. She slashed at Izuku, but he dashed out of the way. Toga. Wait. All eyes turned to Spinner. Don't hurt him. That's the boy that Stain saved. He must be a true hero. Aw, but that makes me like him even more. Dabi turned to Spinner. Are you kidding me? I know Stain's the guy who made us want to come here, but do you really have to follow his motives to the letter? Of course I do. If Stain wills it, then I obey. Izuku wanted to run during their squabble, but something was wrong. He had Momo and Bakugo in his hand, but they didn't seem to care. No one but Toga ran after him, and it was for her own personal reasons. Compress got up and walked over to his teammates. It's no matter. Let the boy live. We have what we need. Izuku looked to Mr. Compress as he pulled out 3 marbles from his hat. You like it? Simple sleight of hand can work wonders. Bird Boy wasn't even on the list. We just thought he'd make a fine addition to our crew. Izuku's entire world froze. He wasn't holding Momo and Bakugo. They were fakes. Compress still had them, and Tokoyami. A portal opened up behind the villains. Sorry, but we really need to talk to your friends. I hope Yoga. A beam of light had hit Compress in his arm, making him drop the marbles and release the students from their glass containers. Izuku turned to see a terrified Aoyama come out from the bushes. Go get them, Monami. Izuku shook out of his stupor and turned to his friends. His friends were clearly still shaken from being released. The villains went down to grab them. Compress reached down to grab Momo, and Dabi reached down to Bakugo. Katsuki turned to see Donnie reach for his neck, and Izuku saw something he thought he would never see again. It was the same look Bakugo had in his eyes when he was in the sludge monster last year. He looked Izuku directly in the eyes, and Izuku did something he wished and hoped he would never do again. He looked directly at someone who was calling out for help and turned away. Izuku ran to Momo instead. To most, this would seem like the obvious choice. And it was. Izuku knew he wouldn't regret it. Momo was his girlfriend, the girl he just told he loved, not just half an hour ago. She's his top priority. What bothered him was that Katsuki was right in front of him, in arm's reach, but he didn't save him. But he couldn't dwell on that now. He raced to Momo, but just as he got to her, Dabi used the hand that wasn't wrapped around Bakugo's neck and blasted Izuku with his flames. Izuku fell backwards from the force of the blast. He furiously patted his arm off, and thankfully to Momo's cast the burns didn't reach skin. He got back up to get to Momo, but it was too late. Dabi grabbed Momo and threw her towards the portal. A hand came out of the portal and grabbed Yaoyorozu by the throat by 4 fingers. Shigaraki's upper body emerged from the dark swirl. Remember me? He said to Momo. Perhaps this will jog your memory. His other hand came through the portal. It was bandaged with the middle finger missing. I think I deserve repayment for what you did. Say bye to your boyfriend. He slowly started to pull her into the portal. Dabi was doing the same with Bakugo. Izuku tried to run forward, but the hostages stopped them. Deku. Stay back. Stop, Izuku. It'll be okay. Izuku's heart was pounding. He couldn't hear anymore. He could only see the lip movements of what they were saying. Just as the back half of Momo's body entered the dark swirl, he could see her mouth one more thing to him. I love you. In Izuku's eyes, everything but Momo in the portal disappeared into shadows. He was shaking, was desperately thinking of anything he could do. Suddenly, the eyes came back. The wielders all surrounded the portal, just staring at him. For the first time, Izuku tried calling to them. Please. I'm begging you. Don't let them take them. Don't let them take Momo. Please. 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 Help me. Then suddenly, lights and streams of all colors exploded out of nowhere. They flew into Izuku, and he could feel his entire body gush with energy. All of the wielders disappeared except one. Just for a second, Izuku felt his body move on its own, just like at the sludge monster. He raised his good arm and casted arm up and reached out for Momo. He felt a power like he never felt before course through his limb. A black mass exploded from his arms. Achako had no idea what to do now. Kayako was unconscious with a gun to her head, and Mustard still had 2 bullets left in his gun. Come on, Achako, think. Think. She couldn't sneak around him anymore. Any sudden movements might cause him to shoot Kayako, so behind him wasn't an option. And obviously they couldn't go from head on. Achako thought back to how they took down 13 from the finals. Above. If he's seen the sports festival, he'll know my quirk. And from what he said earlier, he thinks low of UA students. He's expecting us to make the obvious choice. He's expecting me to go up above. I guess I'll give him what he wants." Achako looked across the clearing to see Tsu looking back at her. Uraraka picked up a rock, motioned to the sky, and then motioned Tsu and to her tongue. "Please work." Uraraka used her quirk on the rock and lightly tossed it into the air. Mustard felt something moving up. At first he assumed one of them was trying to climb a tree, but then saw something in the air. He brought his gun up, only to see a rock, and then suddenly Asui's tongue wrapped around his gun. What the Mustard pulled and yanked against a strength, but then suddenly he felt more movement. He turned to see Uraraka charging him. "Come on. Just a bit closer. Save her." Mustard yanked his arm free from Asui's tongue and started to bring the gun to Kayaka's head. "No. Please, please, please. Stop." Achako dived forward. She felt something in her stomach churn. Her body felt an odd shift in it. She planted all 5 fingers on Mustard's arm. And he dropped to the ground. "What did you do to me? This isn't a part of your quirk." Mustard's entire body felt like 500 pounds. He couldn't move a muscle, and his heart was working in overdrive. Tsu ran up to Achako. "Are you okay?" "Yeah." "Achako. What did you do?" I didn't take away his gravity, I think I increased it." Uraraka looked down at her hands in bewilderment. She had no idea what she just did. She had heard of some quirks evolving in dire situations. Did she just do that now? "Help. Me." Achako saw Mustard struggling. She realized that gravity can put a strain on the heart. Release. Mustard felt his body go back to normal and his heart rate start to calm. And then Tsu knocked him out with a swift kick to the face. The gas began to dissipate. Uraraka bent down, took off her mask and held Kayaka's head in her lap. She checked her pulse to find it slow, likely from the deep sleep. Achako breathed a sigh of relief. She was okay. Achako picked her up bridal style. "Come on, Tsu. Pick up who you can. We'll need to make multiple trips to get them all." As the girls began their trek back to camp, Achako had one thing on her mind. "I hope Deku made it back okay." Izuku's arms felt like they were on fire, especially his broken one. This is definitely not what he meant by help. But it still seemed to get the job done. Izuku focused in on Momo as she disappeared into the portal. As it began to close, the black tendrils shot into the portal and grabbed what it could. Izuku yanked back and pulled 2 people out as the portal closed shut. He let go of who he had to not hurt them, but his power was still out of control. Izuku began to wrestle with his own body. Spasming and jerking around, trying to calm whatever storm he just started. Suddenly a new weight consumed his body. Arms snaked themselves around his torso, trying to help contain the dark energy. Izuku looked down to see Momo. Momo was holding him tight, trying to calm him down. He had done it. He managed to save them. He saved her. Everything came back into focus. His heart slowed down at the revelation that Momo was still here. She was okay. She wasn't being tortured by Shigaraki. She was right there with him. The energy calmed down and retreated back into Izuku's arms. Both teens collapsed to their knees, their arms wrapped around one another. Izuku began to cry. Partially from the lingering pain in his arms. Mostly from the fact that Momo was okay. I thought they were going to take you." Izuku cried as he buried his face into her hair. "I know, me too. But you saved me. I'm okay." Momo lifted Izuku's head up and kissed his lips. "I'm okay," she repeatedly said as she pecked him over and over again to keep him calm. Midoriya. Izuku turned around to see Todoroki had finally found them. He scanned the area to see Momo and Izuku in an embrace, Tokoyami on the ground unconscious, and Midoriya, why is he still here? And where's Bakugo? Izuku's eyes widened and he looked up. Bakugo was nowhere to be found, but someone else was. Izuku looked to see an unconscious body on the ground. They likely hit their head during Izuku's forceful grab. Izuku hadn't grabbed Bakugo from the portal. He grabbed Spinner. They took Bakugo. He had failed. They lost. At this point, Izuku should change his school files to say his home address is the nearest nurse's office or hospital. He was lying in his hospital bed, his right arm wrapped up in white bandages. Luckily the doctors were able to fix him up pretty good, but they definitely still seemed worried about his arm. They ran some scans and said they would talk to him about it tomorrow. The hospital had been a complete train wreck since they made it there. The entirety of Class 1B was hospitalized, but luckily about half of them had already woken up and were given a clean bill of health. Many of Wano were still in the hospital too. Momo wasn't hurt too badly, but she asked if she could stay overnight. Her room wasn't far from Izuku's. Tokoyami was mostly okay, just a little out of it. Everyone from the remedial classes was unscathed for the most part. Some of Wano was still knocked out. And Bakugo. Izuku didn't want to think about it. The previous night. Everything was a blur as soon as Izuku realized Katsuki was gone. All he remembered was Izawa showed up and asked where Bakugo was. Everyone was silent. Once Shouta realized what had happened, he wrapped up Spinner to drag him back to camp and escorted the teens back to the lodge without saying a word. The news of Katsuki's kidnapping obviously wasn't taken well. Apparently, Ragdoll was also taken. No one had seen her since the beginning of the test of courage. Kirishima probably took Katsuki's kidnapping just as bad as Izuku did. Izuku couldn't imagine having your best friend taken. Izuku saw Uraraka holding Jiru on the ground. He was happy that she was okay. Due to the isolation of the camp, it took a while for any sort of fire rescue and ambulances to get there. Once the buildings were put out, a fireman walked out of the building holding what looked like a body covered by a blanket. The fireman walked up to Izawa. "I'm sorry, but she's gone." Izawa shakily walked up to the fireman and slowly removed the blanket to find the charred remains of his sleeping bag. Izawa slowly took it into his arms, clutched it tightly, fell to his knees, and cried. Spinner and Mustard were being loaded into a police car, both in quirk-suppressant cuffs. Izuku heard laughter coming from the trees. He turned to see Muscular confined to a stretcher in cuffs as well. Many of his teeth were missing, and dried blood caked multiple areas of his body. Electrical burns and scars spread from his shoulder to his chest. As he was rolled by, Muscular made eye contact with Izuku and Momo. He smiled widely, "Ha ha ha ha. You two. You two are great. I can't wait to fight you again someday." He laughed his way into his ambulance full of police and drove off. Izuku's new power had busted open his bad arm again. When the paramedics saw his shredded cast and black, bleeding arm, they immediately loaded him into an ambulance first. Momo and Iida got in with him. Todoroki decided to go with Uraraka to make sure she and Jiru were alright. The entire ride to the hospital he never stopped holding Momo's hand. And the image of Bakugo's scared eyes was burned into the back of his eyelids. Present time. What he did was haunting him. He looked Bakugo in the eyes, someone who needed help. And he turned away. Granted, it was to save someone else's life. And of course Bakugo would just berate him for helping. But that didn't matter. Izuku was supposed to be a hero. He was supposed to save the lives of all. He should have tried to save both to begin with instead of trying to save Bakugo when his first attempt to save Momo failed. But, for some reason out of all times in his life, now was the time he was selfish. He just couldn't do it. He couldn't not go after Momo first. Not before that night. Not after he just got her romantically. And certainly not ever now that they were together. He still wasn't exactly sure how he saved her. Whatever that power was, it had to do with One for All. But how they were related was still a mystery. But he still could have just tried to save both. He failed to be a hero, he failed All Might, he certainly failed Bakugo, and he failed himself. Guilt gnawed at his very being. Luckily, the perfect reminder that everything wasn't completely bad and life still had its charm walked into the room. Her hair was down, and she was dressed in hospital robes. Yet she was still perfect to Izuku. Especially with the moonlight pouring through the windows, emphasizing her beauty. She closed the door behind her and walked over to his bed. "Hey Momo. How are you feeling? Are you allowed in him?" She interrupted his question with a kiss. Izuku's mind shut down, allowing this to happen without any question. It was just as heavenly as the first time they kissed, and he was pretty sure that feeling wasn't going away. He was even too entranced to become a blushing and stuttering mess. She sat herself down next to him, never breaking the kiss. Her arms laid down on his chest, pushing him onto the bed. Izuku wrapped his arms around her back, pulling her forward in a hug, her upper body now on top of his. They broke away for air, and Momo began to rub their noses together. "I'm very happy that we get to do that now." Izuku still couldn't believe any of this was real. "This isn't another dream, right?" Momo giggled and opened her mouth to say something, but then decided against it. She pondered an idea she had in her head and chose it as her next action. She leaned back in for another kiss, to which Izuku gladly accepted. Except this time, when they broke away for air, Momo lightly bit Izuku's bottom lip and dragged it back with her. Izuku shuddered. This woman was going to be the death of him. He had no idea where the sudden boost of romantic confidence from either of them came from. Likely teenage hormones. But he hoped it didn't stop. Did that feel real? His eyes wide, Izuku just dumbly nodded with his mouth open. Aha. Momo giggled again and began to kiss him again. Between kisses, Izuku had a question he felt needed answers. Are we going a little too fast? Momo stopped her kissing assault and hovered her face above Izuku's. Maybe. But I think we've waited long enough sitting on these feelings. I'm happy to skip a few steps. Besides, this is our first, and hopefully only, relationship. We can figure out what pace we should take as we go. I know this is very intimate very soon, and neither of us were exactly taught how to handle this kind of thing. But I think as long as we're comfortable, it should be okay, or at least as that's what I can logically deduce from all of this. Are you comfortable with what we're doing now? Yeah. Momo smiled, me too. I'm also doing this because I know you were probably beating yourself up before I got here. Why do you have to be so smart? I need to be smart so I can learn how to handle you. She quipped back. She's what Izuku needed right now. Right now, his entire world was a terrible storm, and Momo was his nice and cozy home to keep him safe and help him forget his troubles. Sadly, it seemed the roofing has a hole. Momo. At camp. When Ka-chan Izuku, I think we should just rest for now. Izuku saw how uncomfortable she seemed. How could he forget? She was almost taken too. She had Shigaraki's hand right around her throat, and she watched Bakugo get taken. She was here, and he wasn't. It was like survivor's guilt, no. He's not dead. They need him for something, so he can't. He can't be. You're right. Sorry. I'll see you in the morning. Momo put her head down into the crook of his neck and curled up into him. Who said I was leaving? Yeah. Definitely moving fast. Ah, but you didn't say too fast. Damn my mumbling. I think it's cute. Izuku decided to go ahead and stop thinking things and just roll with it. They definitely both needed this. Being alone probably wasn't for the best. He once again bathed in an onyx waterfall of hair and held onto Momo tightly, shutting his eyes and letting his exhaustion take over. Izuku? I never said, thank you for saving me. It's okay. No, it's not. Thank you. If you hadn't saved me back then, I don't know where I'd be right now. We've been in life or death situations before, but this time was different. This time I couldn't fight back, death was a mere finger on my throat away. So thank you. For everything. Izuku knew how she felt. He too had been held hostage by Shigaraki. His dry and calloused hand wrapped around your throat. The single lifted finger keeping you from death. It was far from comfortable. He just hoped she could keep the nightmares at bay. Speaking of nightmares, Izuku looked out the window into the night. Whatever nightmare Katsuki was going through, he hoped he was fighting through it. Meanwhile at the Love Bar. Alright. One damn more time. We are the League of Villains, and we think that you ever thought about how with your missing middle finger you can never flip anyone off again? Katsuki laughed in his confinement chair. Duh. That's it. I'm done for the night. I can't take this brat's big mouth. Let's try again tomorrow. Shigaraki said, stomping off. Back at the hospital. Izuku felt Momo shiver, to which he then realized she was still on top of the blankets in a cold hospital. Oh. Sorry. Here you go. Izuku pulled the blankets out from under her and placed them over her body. Momo dug herself deeper into the warm bed and rewrapped herself around Izuku. Thank you. No problem. Izuku's mind was racing at his scenario. He was in bed. With a girl. An extremely gorgeous girl who likes him. Oh dear God. Izuku shook his head. He needs to get used to this stuff. He wants to keep Momo as his girlfriend. Besides, it felt nice. Really nice. Perfect even. Izuku felt himself slip into the warmth and shut his eyes. Momo? He mumbled sleepily. Thanks for breaking the rules and going to help Bakugo with me. I know how you two don't like one another. And of course for saving me when we fought muscular. He could feel Momo smile against his skin, breaking the rules for a boy. And now I'm sleeping in a bed with one. What have I become? I wasn't raised like this. Both chuckled, barely hanging on to consciousness. I'd do it again for you. Me too. But for you, I mean. Momo laughed through her nose and brought her arm up to lay across Izuku's torso. Izuku? I love you. Izuku felt another explosion of joy and peace spread throughout his body. Those were words he thought he would never hear from anyone but his mother. I love you too. Izuku and Momo then slipped into one of the best sleeps they ever had. Are you sure that's a good idea? Toshinori asked. He had just gotten out of his staff meeting. The idea of a traitor was baffling to him. He's gotten to know the staff at UA quite well and couldn't imagine any of them being a traitor. Much less one of the students. But he couldn't dwell on that now. His successor and the rest of his students were in the hospital, one of them was kidnapped along with a pro hero, and he had a worried sick girlfriend to also care for. Simply put, the past 24 hours were a complete shitshow. You two are the best chance we got, Toshinori. If he's gonna talk to anyone, it'll be you two. No one here is gonna convince him. What? You want me to bring in Endeavor or something? Detective Tsukauchi asked sarcastically. Alright, I get it. You're right. I'm just not comfortable taking young Midoriya back to see a villain. I'm sure he saw plenty at camp to last him for a while. Naomasa sighed, that's probably true, but he's the best chance we have at getting Bakugo and Ragdoll back. Spinner will listen to him. Mandalay reported that he didn't want him hurt. And since he's a stain copycat, he follows his ideals. Which means he believes Midoriya is one of the only true heroes out there. He knows Midoriya will be trying his best to save them, so he'll believe anything he says. Alright. I'll talk with him tomorrow. Is there anything else I can do? Honestly, get some rest. Save your energy. Spend time with your girlfriend because… Toshinori. I think this might be it. Wherever we find them. He will likely be there. Toshinori leaned against a UA hallway wall and closed his eyes. I know. I'll talk to you later. He ended the call and rubbed his face. I'm such an idiot. I knew he wasn't dead. I knew the day would come. Why would I start a relationship with that knowledge? Toshinori thought back to everything he had experienced with Izuku and Inko. Everything he'd experienced with his class as a teacher. He's watched them all grow, especially his successor. He had once again gone far beyond his expectations. Toshinori never would have thought that Midoriya would be at the level of power and skill he was now in only a few months of school. He's seen him grow stronger. He's seen a boy go from a scrawny kid who kept his head down and shoulders together to a strong young man eager to succeed in life. Toshinori has been there to see Izuku change and grow and even fall in love. He couldn't be any prouder. Izuku even inspired him to find his own life of passion for someone else. An idea he hadn't humored for a very long time. Despite all the villainous acts going on, the last month has been the happiest he's ever had. Inko had made sure of that. That woman. Toshinori still doesn't understand how she was single before he met her. If he ever met Mr. Midoriya, he needed to ask him what the hell was wrong with him if he decided to walk out on the sweetest woman alive. Tashi had somehow gained weight since meeting her. Inko can definitely cook, and she was reviving the skeletal man's body fat. Not that he didn't need it. Toshinori looked back at the year he's lived since meeting young Midoriya and all the joy it brought him. He had every intention of not making it back alive the next time he faced off against All for One. It's not that he wanted to die, he just didn't think he would have the strength to win again. Especially since his last win left him in the state he was in now. But now. He had everything to fight for. He had everything to die for. He had everything to live for. Toshinori made a vow then and there. He was going to win. All for One would go behind bars. For all Toshinori cared, it could be in jail or in hell. Toshinori had a life to live. This time, he had a family to go home to. Is he dead? We wouldn't be here right now if he were. Genius. We're a part of him, remember? Or did you forget all about One for All? Someone's cranky this morning. As soon as Izuku heard One for All, he realized this definitely wasn't a normal dream. He opened his eyes to see he was in a black void and the silhouettes were back again, except for one man. He was in clear sight for Izuku to see. He was bald with a broad chin and goggles on his forehead. The only hair he had was some scruff on his chin. He wore a black jacket with metal shoulder pads with no shirt underneath. Oh hey, you're awake. Well, not awake, but you can see me. This was it. This was what Izuku has been wanting for quite a while. Now he could finally talk to the past members of One for All. He had so much he wanted to know. He could really use some advice. He opened up his mouth to speak, and he couldn't speak. He physically couldn't speak. Wonderful. Yeah, sorry about that. I know you must have a lot of questions, but they'll have to wait. I'm here to explain your new quirk. Izuku's eyes widened. New quirk. I have two quirks now. Your quirk is called Black Whip. It used to be mine, but you seem to need it far more than I did. You're progressing far faster than we anticipated, so this evolution is definitely well earned. You're doing just great, kid. Izuku felt a wave of satisfaction flow through him. The previous wielders were actually impressed by him. Black Whip is actually a pretty top-grade quirk. It's perfect for capturing and mobility. Just find something you want to grab, and the whips will do whatever you will them to. But there's a bit of a downside. Of course there is. Izuku thought tiredly. There was always a downside in his life, wasn't there? You see, Black Whip's strength is dependent on the strength of the user. And since you have the strength equivalent to destroy a multitude of city blocks, they've adapted to that strength. So until you master your new strength, it might hurt a little bit to use it. I guess I'm used to that. You're pretty used to that though, aren't you? Luckily it shouldn't break your bones. It'll just feel like they're in a hydraulic press. That doesn't sound much better. Your arms will be fine, okay? Well, unless the doctor says your X-ray was bad. In which case your arms are totally screwed. A female third voice chimed in from the void. Wow, way to make the kid feel better. Nana, I'm trying all right. He turned back to Izuku, sighed, and chuckled. You'll be just fine, kid. We couldn't have asked for anyone better to complete this quirk in its entirety. Wait, complete? What does he mean by that? Okay, I think it's time you wake up. Get back to your girlfriend. Oh. I should also mention that we won't watch when you kids get, frisky. I'm gonna. She's lovely by the way. The female voice said. Nana, that's really weird. And I thought we agreed only I would talk. I wanna talk to him too. He's my successor's successor after all. Can you both please just stop? The voices started to fade away as more of them began to bicker. Soon they were gone, and Izuku was left in the void by himself. And by void, it was really the back of his eyelids. Izuku opened his eyes to see the white ceiling of his hospital room. The Wielders seemed like an odd family. Izuku didn't want to move. Momo was still wrapped around him, her warm breath against his neck. Her body heat and the blankets encased him in the perfect warmth. He never knew, and never thought he would ever know, how amazing it felt to wake up with someone. He could really get used to this. The feeling of her curled up with him. The soft glow of the sunrise behind the curtains. His mom and All Might standing at the end of the bed. Izuku slapped his hand over his mouth, hoping he didn't wake Momo. She seemed undisturbed, so Izuku slowly looked back to the intruders at the foot of the bed. Inko was silently crying with her hands over her mouth, and Tashi looked kinda impressed. Wow, you work fast. I haven't even gotten to that base yet. Toshinori whispered. Inko was switching back and forth between extremely happy and downright furious. Oh Izuku, I'm so happy you've found such a beautiful girl to love, but how could you take her innocence so early? I raised you better than this. Inko whisper yelled through her teeth. What? No. Nothing happened. Momo began to move around in her sleep, consciousness slowly coming back. Izuku frantically waved the adults out of the room. Toshinori picked Inko up, knowing she wouldn't move in that state, and carried her out of the room to give the teens some privacy. Not without giving Izuku a thumbs up on the way out. Momo began to stretch away the slumber from her muscles. Izuku did his best to ignore the feeling of having her stretch out her body against him, and the two quite large pillowy mounds that pressed against him. He wasn't doing a very good job. She lifted her head up and put it down on next to Izuku's on the pillow. She barely opened her eyes. Good morning. She mumbled out. Good morning. Izuku almost laughed at an early morning Momo. He imagined she would wake up looking the same as she did when she went to bed. And then go through a prim and proper morning routine. But it seemed even angels had human qualities. Her hair was splayed out everywhere. Strands of black falling across her face. Her eyes barely able to stay open, and movements extremely sluggish and almost reluctant. Almost like she didn't want to get out of bed forever. She yawned widely and moved her head forward. She softly and slowly pressed her lips to Izuku's. Izuku really hoped this was just a small taste of what his future held. Well, except for his mom and All Might being in the room, of course. It almost made Izuku forget about everything that happened the previous day. He looked through the door window to see Detective Tsukauchi walk by. Almost. Not that I want you to go, but someone could walk in. Oh, right. Yes, of course. Momo reluctantly got out of bed, but not before giving Izuku one last kiss. I'll be there for your X-ray results. I'll see you then. Okay, bye. As soon as Momo was out the door, Izuku slumped back down into the pillow, staring wide-eyed in disbelief of what he did last night. The moment Momo entered the hallway, her shoulders were grabbed by Inko, still in the same state as before. Oh, I'm so happy. That's such a beautiful and wonderful young woman like you've fallen for my Izuku, but why are you taking my baby away from me? Inko was pried off of Momo by All Might. She'll be like this for a while. I suggest you come back when she's calmed down. I can only hold her back for so long. Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Yagi. Momo took her cue to leave and slipped back into her hospital room. Toshinori dragged Inko into Izuku's room. So Midoriya, my boy, it seems you have a lot to tell us. Oh Izuku. Why do you have to go through so much? Inko asked, running her hand through her son's hair after Izuku retold his story. I wish I knew. Are you hungry? I could go get you some food. Yeah, actually that sounds good. Could you bring Momo back something too? Something with healthy fats? Oh, of course. I should probably go apologize to her for my behavior earlier. I'll be back soon. Inko stood up and gave both Izuku and Tashi a kiss on the cheek and left. All Might turned back to Izuku. Okay. Now it's time for you to tell the full story. During their interrogation of Spinner, he said he was pulled from the portal by a black energy. At first, we assumed young Tokoyami. But then he said it was actually you that did it. How many times have you spoken or seen the past users of One for All? Toshinori looked confused, 2 or 3 times at best. And even then it was I never spoke to them. I just saw their eyes, and it was usually foggy and hard to remember. Why? Because I did. I spoke to them. Well, I didn't actually speak. They spoke to me. I have one of their quirks. What? It's called Black Whip. It was one of the past users' quirks. I can shoot out black tendrils to grab things. That's how I pulled Momo out of the portal. Toshinori looked completely stunned. He slowly sat down in the chair next to the bed. Can I see? Izuku lifted up his hand and barely tugged on the new sensation in his core. Small little whips began to spiral around his arm. It stung, but it wasn't that much. He deactivated it and looked back to All Might. He said One for All evolved. And that I would complete it in its entirety. What does that mean? I think it means that I'm going to gain all of the past users' quirks. Toshinori was baffled. He'd never even heard of something like this ever happening to any of the previous users. Granted, the only one he knew of was Nana. But she never mentioned anything of the sort to him. 5 quirks, not including himself, Izuku, the first wielder, and the one Izuku has now. Well, that's new. Yeah. How are we gonna explain it to the rest of the class? Well, we'll just have to say you have 2 quirks now. It's not unseen to have more than 1 power, and we already have the story that your first one came in late. So, why not a second one? Because the odds of that are nearly impossible. Yes, but we've established you're a pretty lucky kid. This is the only idea I have. We'll have to train this new ability once you're better. I should go call Gran Torino. Maybe Nana told him something about this. As Toshinori began to walk off, Izuku stopped him. Actually, there's something I need to ask you? All Might turned back around to Izuku, waiting for his question. Back at camp, right before I got Black Whip, I did something. Ka-chan was about to be grabbed by a villain, and so was Momo. I saw that Ka-chan was scared, no matter how much he tried to hide it. I looked right at him. And I turned away. I went to save Momo instead. At this point, tears began to leak out of Izuku's eyes. He's captured because of me. I didn't save him. I chose not to save him. He was right in front of me. But I know that Momo also could have been taken if I didn't. Did I do the wrong thing? Izuku waited for All Might to scold him. He already knew the answer. No. Or, at least he thought he did. What? I did the right thing? No. I don't understand. Toshinori walked over to Izuku and sat on the edge of the bed. Young Midoriya, sometimes there really isn't a right answer. I know that when being a hero, save the people is always the first answer. But sometimes, you just can't save everyone. So you have to save everyone that you can. But I could have saved him. How do you know? I have a question for you now. Imagine someone has a gun, and Yaoyorozu is to one side of the man, and a citizen is to the other. Whoever you run to, the criminal will shoot the other. Do you save the one you love? Or the civilian? If you save Momo, you save the woman you love and can continue to live happily. But you failed your job to save the citizen. If you save the citizen, you saved someone, and they can return home to their family. But you lose the person who you love. I would save both. That's almost never an option. Well, I would stop the gunman before he could shoot either of them. Toshinori nodded. Good. That's the best outcome anyone can hope for. But not the right answer? There is no right answer because you can't predict the outcome. What if you try to attack the criminal and he kills them both before you can stop him? Then no one is saved. Midori, Izuku, I know the media portrays heroes as gods. Great people saving lives with amazing powers. But you forget. We're still human. We have to do things, even if we don't like it. Even the most selfless can be selfish. We can't do everything, and we can't save everyone. What you did was both. You saved a life, but you saved them based on a bias. Selfless and selfish. I still don't understand. I know. No matter what I say, you'll still feel bad. That's good, it shows how much you care and how heroic your heart is. But, at the end of the day, you just have to save everyone that you can. Whether you choose to save one person or somehow manage to save them both is entirely dependent on you. Some would easily choose the one they love. Others would choose the civilian. You're still human, Izuku. Besides, you were under extreme pressure at the time. And she's the first, and hopefully only, girl that you fell for. You didn't want to lose that. And I'm guessing in the end, you still tried to save them both, right? Izuku looked down to his lap. Yeah. Toshinori stood up and walked to the door. You'll face these choices more than once in your life, young Izuku. Sometimes there just isn't a right one. We'll save young Bakugo, I promise. You can make it up to him then. I'll be back in a minute. With that, he walked out the door for Izuku to lament on everything. Izuku expected All Might to be angry and say he should have saved the day. But Izuku forgot that All Might was human too. He didn't know every answer. And he also knew when there wasn't one. He didn't want to think about how many times All Might has had to face that kind of choice throughout his career. How many people he's saved. And how many people he wasn't able to. He knew All Might didn't want him to think that sacrifices should be made and he should let anyone die. Toshinori was just trying to tell him life has questions that have no real solution. Save everyone I can. I will. No matter what. That is all for today's video. Thank you for watching. And please comment down below what you guys want to see next. I'll see you in the next video.